On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the East Shore, I welcome you to the 101st Connecticut House District Candidates Debate. My name is Carol Reimers. I live in Killingworth, and I will be the moderator of this debate. The League of Women Voters is a national, state, and local nonpartisan political organization that welcomes all to join us. We are pleased to sponsor debates like this because we believe in empowering voters and defending democracy. The candidates for the 101st House District seat are John Michael Parker, Democrat, and John Rasmus, Republican. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening statement on their qualifications, followed by questions. Then each candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond to each question. There will be a series of questions that can be followed by 30-second rebuttals. And each candidate is allowed to request that. The moderator will alert the candidates to those questions before asking them. In a pre-debate coin toss, it was determined that Mr. Parker will go first, and we will maintain a rotation after that. So let's begin with the opening statements from the candidates. Mr. Parker?
Thank you. Thank you for moderating tonight. Thanks to the League for hosting us. Thanks for everybody that's going to tune in and get informed on this election. I'm so proud to have served as the state representative of the 101st District, my hometown where I was born and raised, where I live now, Madison and Durham. And I'm really proud coming into this election to be endorsed, as mentioned, by the Democratic Party, also by the Working Families and the Independent Party, because I think there's a lot more that unites us than divides us. Tonight, I'm excited to talk about some issues, get to talk about my record, the work that I've done, and talk about some of the ideas that I have for what's ahead. So looking forward to the chance to discuss. Thank you for being here. Thank you, John, for the time. And looking forward to hearing from you folks. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rasmus?
Thank you, and good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters and all the staff that are putting this together. It's a great forum, and it allows the voters to find out what their candidates are all about. So I truly do appreciate the time. I'm going to tell you, I'm not a career politician. I'm 62 years old, and this is my first run for office, so I'm clearly not going to be a career politician. I'm a certified public accountant. I worked for the state auditor's office for 38 years, ran it for 6 years. That gave me the background about the state budget, which concerns me so much. I put my name in the ring after retiring from 38 years of service on March 31st. Put my name in the ring 12:09 the next day. 2 takeaways from that. Had a 9-minute retirement. And it was on April 1st, April Fool's Day. Sometimes I wonder if there's some meaning to that. Knocked on 8,000 doors over the district, and I can tell you that there are people that are concerned, and we're going to talk about those issues tonight, and I appreciate this debate.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is, please list the main issues you plan to focus on to benefit your district's residents. And Mr. Rasmus, will you start?
Sure. We've heard a lot of, I'll say, rhetoric over the last few months, a lot about the financial condition of the state and the affordability of Connecticut. We're hearing a lot about state budget surpluses, and the fact is we really don't have state surpluses. We're about $68 billion in debt, and that concerns me. And we're going to be talking a lot about a lot of issues where we have to consider the financial condition of the state. I don't blame Ned Lamont. I don't blame just Democrats. I blame Republicans and Democrats that for 30 years, 40 years, didn't fund the pension plans, didn't fund the promises they made for health care, and bonded excessively. And that's going to put us into an area where the things that we want to do for education, for the environment, for social services are all going to be affected by that. So that concerns me immensely.
Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I'm right there that I think our biggest concerns are about the budget. Locally, making sure that Madison and Durham remain affordable and accessible for folks, for young families, for seniors that want to retire and stay here. And statewide, making sure we continue to nurture our economy. I can't wait to talk about the budget because I think we actually had a pretty strong year paying down billions of dollars of that long-term debt that we have been saddled with, making sure that our rainy day fund is full, cutting taxes for folks, and investing in our community. So I think affordability in our economy is our top concern, but I'd be remiss to not mention that we're also concerned about reproductive rights. We're concerned about gun violence prevention. We're concerned about the health and safety of our communities. And these are all issues that ultimately intersect to make sure that Connecticut, and especially the 101st, are great places for people to live.
Great, thank you. Now we're going into the section of questions where you will have the 30-second rebuttal upon request. And that first question in that grouping is, what is your view of the affordable housing issue? And Mr. Parker, you're first.
Yes, ma'am. So affordable housing, let me start by underlining that the intention of this work is critical. Like I said, making sure that young families can afford to get houses here in Madison and Durham, make sure that seniors can afford to stay here when they retire and to keep paying their bills. So the work that we need to do on housing is immense and important. I think it's been a little bit politicized, especially during this campaign season. People will often talk about a law 830G, which was passed into statute long before I got to the legislature, which we tweaked in the past and will keep tweaking going forward. I think really what we're trying to find is that balance so that our incredibly hardworking, dedicated local officials that serve on our planning and zoning committees and on our boards of selectmen and finance and so forth are able to really ensure that the housing that's happening and the developments are suitable to a community, but also that we have the right incentives in place to make sure that we're doing the important work of actually getting more affordable housing in our communities, because we're too far behind on that and there's a lot of progress we need to make.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rasmus.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of issues that I believe John Michael and myself will agree on. I have to say I do have some grave concerns about 830G, and I think, hey, I'm for affordable housing. And I just think there's other ways of going about accomplishing those goals of 830G. I'm all for CHFA type programs, down payment assistance type programs. I think we have to look towards those types of programs. There's some dangers in 830G that concern me.
Okay. Did you have any further comment? Okay, then we're on to the next question. How would you address the need to improve Connecticut's roads and bridges? And Mr. Rasmus, you get to start.
Thank you. Obviously, transportation needs are a big issue, and we have ways of going about accomplishing certain goals about moving people so that they can get into their jobs, they can get back home in time. We can do it through a highway system, or we can do it through mass transit. I think we have to, again, go back to the budget and say, okay, what can we afford, what works, and where do we want to be in 20 years from now? And if we don't do the proper planning, we see the log jams on I-95. We see a Shoreline East system, Metro North system that folks have issue with. I think we have to put this plan together and make sure that we put our money in the right places. It's all about spending our money in a better manner. We're not doing a great job of doing that right now.
Okay, Mr. Parker?
Yeah, transportation is such an important issue when it comes to economic development, when it comes to public safety, people being able to get to the resources they need. I'm glad that we've taken a more responsible approach to our special transportation fund, which for many years had been raided at the General Assembly, and we're now protecting better and using those funds appropriately. And I think that these projects are statewide. It's federal infrastructure dollars that are going to make a big difference for our highways and bridges, but there's a lot of local work too. Actually, just yesterday, we celebrated that Madison got over $1 million in transit-oriented development funding for two really important projects to our downtown, things that have been worked on and stalled for many years that me and our delegation and our town leadership got over the finish line. And there's more work to do with transit-oriented development. I think we're making some progress on the Shoreline East, electrifying those cars, but now making more access right here in our district. And excited to bring a lot more of those projects to Durham in the coming years. We'll talk more about that infrastructure work in the future.
Okay. Next question. How do you view the roles of the state and the private sector to help improve the state's economy? Mr. Parker, you're first.
Sure. The role of the state and the private sector in improving our economy, I think that economic development, I do a lot of work, especially in the arts, culture, and tourism area myself, which is thinking about ways that we're investing in our communities and helping ensure that our communities thrive. And so the work looks like funding opportunities from the state side, and then it looks like private businesses stepping in, the bold entrepreneurs that really make our communities come to life and create jobs. Those are critical. I think we need to continue that dialogue from the private sector to the government side. I think the governor's workforce council has been really important in this regard, making sure that we're listening to the job creators so that we know what training programs we need to support, so that we know what pathways we're creating for young people and for adults that are looking to change their careers. So it's definitely a mix of both. I'm really proud to have recently taken CBIA's pledge this year to make sure that we're moving forward some business-friendly policies. Thanks for the question.
Mr. Rasmus, same question.
Sure. I'll say I'm a free market guy, and when we talk about government creating jobs, government shouldn't be creating jobs. Government should be creating an environment to create jobs, and I think there's a big difference. I think we have to make sure that we have unemployment type programs that are conducive to making a bigger pool of available workers out there, because we have restaurants that are closing, we have retail stores that are having a hard time filling positions, we're having pharmacies that are cutting their hours because they don't have the manpower. So I think when we think about our unemployment practices and our unemployment laws and regulations, we have to get more business friendly. Again, government's not creating jobs. Government should be creating an environment that will private sector will create those jobs. Thank you.
Mr. Parker, would you like to add some more?
Yeah, I would like to. I just want to highlight that I think one sector where we see a lot of this need for public-private partnership is in the nonprofit sector. That's where my professional work is, so I have some sense of this from that side too. And over the last decade or so, state government has actually shrunk and pushed a lot of services out into the nonprofit sector. Now, the wisdom of that we can talk about later, but it's where we are. And so we've needed to do more work to make sure that we're getting fair wages for folks that provide these critical nonprofit services. A lot of it is related to health, mental health. And so that's a place that we need to ensure that partnership is still happening, and government actually plays a huge role in that.
Mr. Rasmus, do you have more you'd like to speak on this subject?
No, I think I answered that question.
Okay, great. All right, our next question. What do you think could make Connecticut more affordable for more people? And Mr. Rasmus, you're first.
Sure. I think what we really have to do is take a look at the state budget. We have to institute some form of zero-based budgeting so that we can cut taxes. Everybody can say that they're going to cut taxes. If you don't have a plan to cut spending, you can't cut taxes. And I'm not talking about temporary tax cuts. I'm talking about permanent tax cuts. I took the pledge along with other Republicans in the House to sign the contract with Connecticut. And our plan is to cut the income tax, cut the meals tax. We want to cut the transportation highway tax, use tax, that is going to go in effect in January. And we don't want that 25-cent gas tax that's going to be coming back on December 1st to go forward. We have to make these tax cuts more permanent. But again, it all goes back to zero-based budgeting. The way it works now is we have a system where we start with what we spent this year, we add 4.5% for the following year, we add 9% to that, and we can't do that any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barker?
Yeah. Again, probably, as I said before, the most critical question that we're going to answer and think about. I want to start by highlighting the taxes that we have cut and the work that we have done to make Connecticut more affordable. Removing the gas tax, which has helped push Connecticut's prices or some of the lowest in our region. Incredible work on the child tax credit for families with kids under the age of 18. The earned income tax credit for some of our folks that are struggling the most. And also senior tax cuts, so phasing out Social Security, state income tax, annuities, IRAs over the next few years. Now, a lot of these programs are income limited, and when we talk about what we can do to make Connecticut more affordable for more people in the future, I'd like to see us increase those. making sure that we can have even more folks benefiting from all these variety of programs that are designed to ensure that Connecticut is indeed affordable. We're facing inflation, we're facing global challenges. There's a lot more work to do. Let's go ahead and extend that gas tax. Let's move some of these other limits forward. But I want to remind folks that we've taken some real important steps this last year, and I hope that people will be feeling that.
Mr. Rasmus, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate. I believe we have to make broader-based tax cuts, and we have to make them permanent. These temporary tax cuts, while they did help in the short term, I'm just more long-term focused. And again, it goes all back to the budget. And until we do something with the state budget, it's going to be very hard to make those permanent tax cuts, and that's what's needed.
Go ahead.
Are we allowed to have another rebuttal?
Well, this would be your first
This is my first rebuttal. Okay, great. There we
go.
Continuing the thought about how we make our budget work for this, I want to also emphasize that this last year we paid down $5 billion, or the last 2 years, $5 billion in debt. Think about that as advancing payments on your mortgage, so you're paying less incrementally. That saves millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions over the next decade and beyond, so that we can actually use that money, whether it's for further tax cuts or for more investments in programs. So I really think our approach to paying down debt and using what's reasonable to make these tax cuts is the way. And in terms of making these permanent, I mean, we're doing a budget every 2 years. We come and tweak it every year. These are things that we constantly have to be working on, and we will.
We can continue on this subject, Mr. Rasmus, if you'd like a few more minutes to talk about it, or we can go on to the next question, but it's up to you.
No. I think this is a very important issue. And, I think we have to be clear. What happened over the last 30, 40 years? We had budgets that we just couldn't sustain. I kind of use the analogy of I have $14 in my pocket. So I tell you I have a $14 surplus. I don't tell you that I didn't pay my mortgage. I ran up my credit cards. And I didn't pay my utility bills last month. But I have a $14 surplus because I have $14 in my pocket. That's what's going on with government, and we have to take it into a different direction. We have to turn around this train.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Parker. One more time. You have any more you would like to add?
I think the train's moving in a good direction right now. I think paying down the debt, I think filling the rainy day fund, $3.2 billion in budget reserves for the challenges we're in and the ones we're going to keep stepping into. And then again, making the tax relief that we can is the right path. And I'm grateful that our team, that the governor has been leading the fight on this. I think a lot of people across Connecticut are happy with some of the progress they've seen, feeling the challenges, and are going to hold us to account to continue with it.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. How can state government support more diversity in our workforce, especially in our classrooms? And Mr. Parker, you're first.
Thank you for the question. We did some great work just this last year on minority teacher recruitment. My background is as an educator. Now I lead an education nonprofit, and so we think a lot about what we call culturally responsive teaching and learning. So making sure that we are speaking to the incredibly diverse young people across the state of Connecticut, and making sure that the educators that are in front of them and the outside programs that we bring into schools and classrooms are reflective of their communities, of their backgrounds, and open their eyes and their minds to what's beyond them. So I think the work we've done around minority teacher recruitment is critical. I think the attention we pay on the Education Committee to making sure that we are supporting the great educators we have out there, furthering our social emotional learning programs. Hopefully I'll have a chance to talk more later about the work we did this year around children's mental health, because we know the challenges that our schools and our educators have seen during the last 2 years, 3 years with the pandemic, and making sure that we're bringing funding for mental health practitioners, for providers to be there in buildings and supporting students. That's the kind of space we need to nurture so that diversity can really shine across our state.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmus?
Yes, I'll say this is an area, like I said, that I know John Michael and I will agree on. I think that was a positive step with the minority recruitment teacher program. I have to tell you, it's difficult to compensate our educators properly. It's just a profession that, I always say, you just can't pay the great educators, the great teachers, the teachers that go into that inner city classroom and take on those challenges. We can't pay them enough. And I guess I will say, I'm I'm more into, again, free market. If there's some way we can reward the good teachers, those educators that make a difference, I'm all for it. I've been teaching for 17 years. I teach in the Connecticut State University system. I'm an adjunct faculty member. I teach at the graduate and undergraduate levels. And I can tell you, people do not do it for the money. I do it because I want to give back to the profession. I do it because, what the question was all about, I serve a very diverse community in the school that I teach at.
Thank you. Any further on this topic?
Sure. I just can't miss the opportunity to underline the important work that our teachers and our school leaders have been doing, especially here in Madison and Durham, with some really challenging times. And the stuff that educators have had to deal with. My mom's a school nurse, so let's also talk about the faculty around the teachers in the building, all of whom work together as a team. And I'll just say that, to bring it back to the budget question, we make promises to teachers, folks that get into this profession, not for the money, but we say you're going to give you a good retirement. And I'm proud to have earned the endorsement of the Association of Retired Teachers PAC because I'm going to continue to make those pension payments for them into the future, which we promised them.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmus, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I guess I'll just go back to, we have to do something for educators. And again, I will just reiterate, we can't just throw money at it, but what we have to do is target those special educators, those educators that go above and beyond. We have to compensate them and make sure that we encourage that type of, make sure somebody wants to be in that profession for that reason.
Okay, thank you. The next question. A new free program, Waterford Upstart, has 200 slots for children entering kindergarten in 2023. Do you think the state should support free pre-K education for all children? And Mr. Rasmus, you get to start.
Yeah, like I said, we have this budget problem, and until we make some meaningful strides in taking care of that $68 billion debt, it's going to be hard to fund these types of programs. I would not say that I'm against it. I would not say I'm for it. I would have to explore what the outcomes of this program will be, how much it's going to cost. I know recently in Madison, there was a proposal put forward that we would open up some slots for our schools for children coming in from New Haven. It's always devil's in the details. Apparently, there's a $3,000 per pupil reimbursement, and that's just not adequate. So it all gets back to the budget. Till we take care of that budget, it's just going to make it harder for these proposals. But I'm not saying no. I think we would have to study it further. And as far as the budget, I know my opponent talks about putting money into the pension fund. We're $9 billion more in debt than we were 4 years ago.
Okay. Mr. Parker, same question.
Yeah. I know my auditor friend has probably heard this truism a lot, but a budget is a representation of your priorities. Absolutely, we should have pre-K, free pre-K for students across our state, and we should prioritize it in our budget and make it work. Early childhood education is some of the most critical opportunity to reach young people and support their development. Again, as I mentioned, social and emotional development, beginning to get young learners ready to interact with one another and thrive in this really complex, changing world that we're sticking them into. In terms of the specific program, I don't know exactly what's going on there in Waterbury, but the idea as a value statement to say that we're moving towards free pre-K, I think it's an absolute yes, and I look forward to finding a way to make that priority work inside of our budget.
Okay. Mr. Rasmus, would you like to add any more at this time?
No, again, I would just reiterate, I don't want the viewers to believe that I'm against this program. I would just say we would need to study the cost, find out what the benefits are, what the goals are, and it all becomes a budgetary decision. And if we can make it work, and it's an efficiently run program, and we see a lot of positive outcomes, it's something I would consider.
Okay. Mr. Parker, any more?
Yeah, I would because John had mentioned the idea of programs, choice programs that bring students from other communities into our schools. Really exciting program. When we think about what makes for a strong learning environment, as you referenced before, we know that diverse learning communities help students thrive, students of all backgrounds. So I'm really excited to learn about how that program could work in communities like Madison and Durham, so that we are exposing our young people that live here in sort of suburban Connecticut to the broader world that they're going to step into as soon as they graduate from high school. So appreciate you bringing that up, and looking forward to seeing how we can make that work.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Do you agree with Connecticut's current laws that allow for same-sex marriage and a woman's right to choose? Would you adapt the laws regulating either of these rights, or would you support allowing them to stand as currently written? And Mr. Parker, you start, please.
Thank you for the question. Critically important to be completely clear. I fully agree with our laws that support same-sex marriage. I fully agree with our laws that support women's right to choose. In terms of changing those laws, if anything, I want to make them stronger. As I did this last year, working with the Reproductive Rights Caucus after Roe v. Wade was overturned, to ensure that here in Connecticut, we were doing everything we could to be unequivocal that we support a woman's right to choose in Connecticut, and that our providers are going to be protected, that people like folks in Texas can't come sue people here in Connecticut. We're standing up to say that what we do in Connecticut is aligned with our values and what so much of our population believes, and we're going to have your back. So if we need to tweak these laws and further enshrine them here in our state laws, that's what I'm on board for. And I think that the vast majority of people in our community are right on that same page. Thank you so much for asking.
Okay. Mr. Rasmus?
Well, this is one of those exact issues where I said you will not see a difference between my opponent and myself. I am pro-choice. I've come out very clear, pro-choice, and I agree with the action that was taken in the last session of the legislature. 4 daughters. I have 4 daughters. I have 4 granddaughters. I want to make sure that their right to reproductive freedoms is maintained, and I'm 100% behind that.
Okay. Any further on this question?
Sure. I appreciate you sharing that, John. I think the reason you're asking the question, of course, is because we've seen an activist Supreme Court overturn decades of established precedent that all Americans have built their lives around. And we're hearing conversation that something like same-sex marriage might be in the sights. So I always tell people that this is one of the most important times to ensure that the people that serve you in your state government are fully aligned with your values and are going to fight for these issues that maybe we've come to take for granted. But as we've seen in a rude awakening, we cannot.
Okay. Mr. Rasmus, would you like to add anything?
Yeah. I would say I'm not sure if people totally understand, what happened with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Basically, it was pushed back to the states. And I have to say, if you're a constitutionalist, and I think even Justice Ginsburg, I think was questioning Roe versus Wade, it's an issue that they felt was back to the states. And again, I support what the state of Connecticut did. And people that come to Connecticut, they know that that's a lockbox. We are going to maintain that.
Okay, thank you. What approaches would you pursue to make health coverage more affordable in Connecticut? Mr. Rasmus.
Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest challenges when you talk to small business owners. I want to maintain my workforce. I want to keep them, and I want to compensate them. And part of that compensation package is health insurance. And recently, the increases that were approved by the state Department of Insurance a few weeks ago showed that, if I have my numbers correct, it's double-digit increases, and it's something that small business owners are going to have a tough time being able to offer that health insurance. I think we have to look at pools. I think we have to look at their strength in numbers, and I think we have to regulate the industry better. And until we do that, we're going to see those significant increases. Small business won't be able to absorb it. It's going to get more costlier for government-run programs to offer those programs. And again, getting back to that good old state budget, we're $68 billion in debt, and government cannot take on more debt. And that's what will happen if we don't lower those health care premiums.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parker?
Yeah. The affordability of health care is a critical issue. My father was a physician. My mom, as I said before, is a school nurse. have grown up around medical providers and folks in healthcare and know how safe one can feel knowing that that's at their fingertips, and then how terrified folks can feel when they don't have that kind of access. So I think that the work we've done this last year in the legislature capping the cost of insulin and prescription drugs is a really important step. There's a lot more work that our federal partners have to do to keep pushing that ball forward. It's a fight in Connecticut with the insurance industry in Hartford. I was a proud supporter of the Connecticut option, which would make more availability for folks to come into a larger healthcare plan that our comptroller is showing savings on. That's the direction we need to move, especially for nonprofits like the one that I run, to be able to have access to a plan that's going to be more affordable for the organization and for the individuals. That's critical. And I think when we pool our resources and get more folks working together and get stronger leverage against these big insurance companies, we're going to make some more progress.
Any further you'd like to add?
Yeah. I guess I'll just say government is responsible for regulating the industry. And what happened a few months ago with these increases just shows that it's just not working. And we have to do a better job. Status quo, we can't have status quo in this area any longer. Any more?
Are we ready to go on to the next question?
I just love agreeing on stronger regulations. Okay. I don't know if that's what we're always going to go for, but I'll take it.
Okay. What strategies would you support to mitigate climate change and improve our resilience to its impact? And Mr. Parker, you're first.
Yes, such an important question. So I serve on the Environment Committee in the legislature. We have done some really important work over the last few years. Some of the highlights are improving our bottle deposit system, making sure that we're able to fund climate resilience programs through the state treasurer to invest funds for small towns to use on these really big challenges that are often outside of a municipal budget. We passed the Connecticut Clean Air Act, which is ensuring that we're keeping healthy air for our healthy and safe communities, regulating, as we talked about, the cars on our road and our transportation system. Climate change is an existential threat that we face, and it's probably second to the economy, which we talked about, which feels really present. It's the biggest looming challenge that we're all facing, and I'm excited to do more work on this. Proud to be endorsed by Sierra Club, by the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, because the policies that we are going to continue to push to make sure we have a clean environment and one that will be there for us for generations to come is critical work.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmus?
Yeah. I don't think there's one politician out there, although I wouldn't consider myself a politician, but I don't think there's one person running for public office that would say, I'm not for a cleaner environment. Quite honestly, I'm doing this for my kids, for my grandkids. I want them to live in a better state of Connecticut. I want them to live in a cleaner state of Connecticut. So let's be clear. Everybody is for a more clean, better environment. I also have some experience in this area. I had served on a finance board in Southington where we had 2 Superfund sites. This goes back to the 1990s. And I can tell you, once you get into that arena, it turns into a very expensive arena. And we have to do all in our power to make sure that those types of things don't happen. I'm also very concerned about the shoreline and the rising tides and the water. We can either retreat, okay, or we can build up our seawalls and take other measures to make sure that we're not underwater. Thank you.
Would you like to add anything?
I would love to.
Okay.
Point taken that every person sitting in the seat is going to say they support a clean environment. So it's about putting your money where your mouth is. It's about prioritizing these dollars in the budget. We've done that in the last 2 years. I'm really proud that you mentioned seawalls. We actually brought over $700 million back to Madison to help build a seawall at Garvin Point. This is a critical climate resilience project affecting the crown jewel in the town of Madison, and we got money to make that happen. These are the kind of projects we're going to have to continue doing, informed by science, informed by data, and the folks that are leading this work.
Would you like to add anything else?
Sure. We can talk about projects that we bring home, and obviously that's a worthwhile project, and they usually are worthwhile projects. We have to be wary, though, of the fact that most of the funds that we receive are bonded. So we're basically taking it from one credit card and putting it on another credit card. So again, I know I keep harping on the budget, but these are the factors and these are the harms that we have from a budget situation that we're faced with. And again, I'm for a cleaner environment, and I'm for these programs that will save our shoreline.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If the early voting referenda passes, what measures would you support or oppose to establish the new process? Mr. Rasmus?
Well, this is going to be a very important question put before the voters. And I think I'm very clear. I think everybody's vote should be counted. And we should do all that we can to make sure that we have a legitimate system in place that allows all that want to vote to be able to vote. So I want to be clear on that. One thing that concerns me when we talk about new programs, though, is what is the cost going to be? Are we going to reimburse our towns because they're going to have to keep a voting station open? We have 3 voting districts in this 101 House seat. We have the high school in Durham, we have the elementary school in Madison, and the middle school in Madison. We can't keep those open for 4 weeks for early voting, so that's something that we have to consider. Also should be noted that we do have early voting through the absentee ballot process, but I know this question obviously will take that further. So I guess long story short, we have to make sure it's safe and legitimate, and I would be open to it.
Okay. Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I want to be really clear. Some people don't like to say how they're going to vote before the election. I'm voting yes on this question. I voted yes in the legislature when this came back before the General Assembly to make sure it could get to a ballot initiative. I was frankly surprised that it didn't receive as much bipartisan support across our chambers as I would have expected when we're living in a time when a lot of people feel like our democracy is threatened, when there are forces that are trying to take away people's ability to vote. I don't think that's happening quite the same extent here in Connecticut. I'm grateful for that. But this is one of those steps that we can take to ensure that we have full franchise here across our state. So yes, figuring out the details about where this is going to take place, how we can work across our voting districts. I trust that the people that do this work, whether it's the volunteers or the municipal officials, our town clerks, our registrars, are hardworking people that believe in democracy, and they're going to continue to fight for it and expand it. It is long past time that Connecticut did this. We are one of 5 states that doesn't have in-person early voting, and I can't wait for us to get there in the future. And after that, we'll talk about no excuse absentee voting. But I ran out of time.
Okay. Do you have any more you would like to talk about?
Sure. I'll go back to, we have to just make sure it's a legitimate system. Let's face it, let's be realists. There's always some degree of voter fraud that does occur, and hopefully it's a extremely, extremely small fraction of 1%. It does happen out there. We have to be realists. We have to make sure that we're creating a system that brings that number down, then brings that number up. So again, I'm for it. Let's just make sure the safeguards are in place, and let's make sure that the towns are reimbursed for this if it's going to cost the towns, not some unfunded mandate like the state likes to do.
Any more you would like to say? You're good?
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're moving into what we're kind of calling a lightning round because there'll be no rebuttals. So we'll just give you a minute to respond. So, and we're going to stay with the topic of voting. So do you support no excuse absentee voting, and why or why not? And Mr. Parker, you're first.
I do. Voter fraud is exceedingly rare. We have a lot of great, smart, I think well-supported people making sure our elections are free and fair. And no excuse absentee voting is just the next step to make sure that more people have access to make their voice heard in their election. The way that the absentee process works now is, if you haven't seen the application, it's an application process. It's complex back and forth. It's choosing the right box. During the pandemic, it was a whole nother round of confusions around how to make that work. So I think moving to no excuse absentee is the absolute right next step. Look forward to supporting it in the legislature. And then when it gets to a ballot question, look forward to supporting it as a voter.
Okay, Mr. Rasmus?
Sure. I'll go back to I'm open to it if we can ensure that it is not going to in any way make our elections more susceptible to fraud. And if we can say that and we can determine that that's truly the case and we're not putting, again, any unfunded mandates onto the towns like the state has done before, it's something I would consider.
Okay, next question. How do you define democracy in this age of severe partisanship? Mr. Rasmus?
Well, I think it's up to individuals, and I have to say, when I started this campaign, I made it very clear to everyone that was involved in my candidacy, I'm not going to run a negative campaign, and right off the bat, and I'm not going to change that until through November 8th. It's just not going to happen. I'm getting sick of the commercials on both sides. I think that divides us. And democracy is all about, people have different ideas. John Michael and I have different backgrounds. We have different strengths. But to get to a point where, we can't be democratic about things. And, we really want to be all about democracy is about doing what's best for the people. And we have to make sure that that's clear.
Mr. Parker?
I got involved in this because I was really frustrated by the partisanship, by the lack of progress that was happening, by the way that we sized people up and made complete decisions about them and their character and their belief system because of the letter next to their name. I'm really proud in the legislature to have done a lot of bipartisan work, have led legislation that has been unanimously supported. I'm the co-founder of a group called the Future Caucus, which is bipartisan young legislators working together to engage the next generation in our bipartisan politics. I said before that I've been endorsed by the Independent Party, which is a group in Connecticut that's really trying to think outside of the two-party system. And I'm grateful to have been aligned with that work and to have been someone that's in a place where independent voters feel connected to and confident, as I did in 2020. We've seen attacks on our democracy in the last 2 years. We live in a time when we have people that are refusing to believe the results of a free and fair election. Again, I don't think we're seeing as much of that here in Connecticut. I'm grateful we don't see that here in the 101st District, but that's the national context we're inside of. So defending democracy in a place like Connecticut that's on the front lines of showing how we can do it as best as possible is a real priority of mine.
Thank you. So sort of in the same theme, how can the state legislature reduce the partisan fervor we hear from its leaders? And Mr. Parker, you're first.
I am always proud to tell people when I knock on their door, which I've done for the last, now 6 years. Is that right? After 3 campaigns? Now, especially having served in the legislature, that over 90% of the bills that we did in just this last session were bipartisan. There is so much more working together that happens in the state of Connecticut than we're attuned to with our national conversation. So if we can get outside of the national media, outside of the partisanship, outside of some of these federal issues, and realize that at the state of Connecticut, we have to pass a balanced budget every year. We have to work together on policies that affect our communities because we look people in their faces at their doors when we talk to them. It brings people together. I'm grateful for the relationships I have through the Future Caucus with younger Republican legislators, with people across the chamber, and the work that we've done together is really ensuring that we're listening to all the people in our community, because actually the largest individual group in Connecticut is unaffiliated voters, folks that don't feel at home on one side or the other. That's who we have to also serve and represent.
Okay, Mr. Rasmus.
Yeah, I'll say there's no doubt that you have to reach across the aisle to reach consensus. And I'll say I have 38 years of experience doing that. Connecticut is one of the 50 states that has a two-state auditor system. We have one that's appointed by the Republicans, one that's appointed by the Democrats. I was appointed 6 years ago to lead the office. I had to work with both sides to get the good work that we got through to be palatable to both sides. So keep the politics out of it. Make sure that we have a very fair system in place. I think is, you need both parties to ensure that. I have to say, I was at Bauer Park this past weekend, and I got the best, response from someone that came up to me, and they said to me, "I'm not going to vote for you." And why did I feel that that was something that I'm proud of? Because he said, I just am not going to vote for a Republican. It's not you, but if you get into this seat, I am not going to be disappointed. I'm not going to be unhappy that you're representing me. So that to me was said something.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the next question. So please describe a time when you worked with someone with an opposing viewpoint. And Mr. Rasmus, you get to start to tell us.
Boy, that's something that used to be daily. I think you have to keep an open mind, and I think you can't be as reactive as you might want to. That you might feel you have to. It's all about just hearing from all different angles, and that's not to say that you don't want to put your point forth. Calmly explain what your position is, why you feel that your position should be considered. But again, it's all about an even exchange of ideas, of opinions, and to hopefully come to a consensus. Is it always easy? Let's face it, it's not always easy. But you have to keep that in your toolbox. Otherwise, you're going to be a man on your own island. You have to work together.
Mr. Parker?
So as a member of the Public Health Committee this last session, I had the real privilege of leading our legislation on substance use and fighting the opioids epidemic this last year. We went through the whole process, great public input from advocates, lots of ideas on the table. We worked with our agency partners, and we got a piece of legislation that I thought was pretty strong. Right before I was going to take it out on the floor, I got a text message that it was getting pulled because the Republicans weren't there on it. So I went in the back room. I sat down with Minority Leader Vin Candelora, with another Republican, Dr. Pettit, one of my colleagues, to say, okay, what are we missing? What do we need to bring into this bill to get it there? I don't know that we had super opposing views, but maybe different priorities. And we found a way to ensure that some of the issues around enforcement and funding for other law enforcement programs would come into that to make sure that we actually had a bill that everyone could sign on to. So we pulled it off. 30 minutes later, we were able to get a vote that had bipartisan support, unanimous in our chamber. And then we worked it upstairs in the Senate and got it done too. That's how legislation happens, and it's always about working together.
Okay. So the next question, again, about voting. Will you accept the outcome of the November 8th election as certified by our Secretary of the State? Mr. Parker?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Rasmus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the last question for you is, what issue would you like to address that we haven't covered yet? And I think that would be Mr. Rasmus, you're first.
Yeah, I guess the one issue that is kind of the big elephant in the room is, again, going back to that state budget. And all of the things that most of the things that we talked about tonight, there are some dollars and cents associated with those issues. And again, I think we can't get into a false sense of security that everything is good in Connecticut on the budget front. Again, I'll go back to we have to do more in the way of looking at what the state budget is, what it encompasses, what are the priorities. That's something that's just not being done at this point in time. We're not doing enough to go sifting through agency budgets and say, we have a budget that we can't afford. What can we do to make sure that we're getting the bang for our buck, that government's running efficiently, economically? Until we do that, I think all of these things, education, the environment, social services, they're all going to be harmed by that point.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
We've talked a lot about the budget, so I'll leave it there for now. There's two other issues I want to mention specifically that I don't think we've covered enough. The first one is about gun violence prevention, an issue that is so critical in our communities, keeping folks safe. This is about public safety. This is about red flag laws. I'm proud to have supported expanded red flag laws, to have supported the start of an Office of Gun Violence Prevention, Community Violence Prevention here in the state. This is something I hear from so many parents, and more work needs to be done. The other issue is I referenced earlier about children's mental health and the landmark legislation we did this year that's ensuring that we're supporting our young people in their schools. And I also really want to make sure we're focusing on our most vulnerable communities. So LGBTQIA youth, folks that are living in poverty, folks that experience violence at home. I wore purple tonight. It's domestic violence awareness. There's so many issues that people face when they get home at the end of the day. And there's a lot of work that we can do when they're in school, when they're seeing their healthcare providers to support the challenges that they're facing. So looking forward to talking more about those in the future.
So we do need to get closing statements from the candidates. So I won't say end it completely right here. And Mr. Barker, you're first.
Thank you. So when I was sworn into this office on January 6th, 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, I knew the stakes were high. And then what happened in DC later that afternoon only further reinforced that in Connecticut we have to do better. I'm really proud over the last 2 years to meet many of the challenges that folks have shared with me and to work towards a vision of state government that I outlined when I ran in 2020. I said that government needs to take care of people. We've done that with mental health, with education. I said the government needs to prepare people to succeed. We've done that with supporting economic development in our businesses and job training programs. And I said the government needs to build communities in which people can thrive. And we've done that by supporting our environment, by supporting gun violence prevention and community public safety, by passing a responsible, balanced budget that cuts taxes, that pays down debt, that saves money for a rainy day, and that invests in our communities. There is clearly so much more work to be done, and I'm ready to take on those challenges. I'm running for re-election because I believe in what we can do together, because I believe in our future. And I'm so thankful for the chance to talk about this tonight and to get to spend some time with you, John.
Mr. Rasmus, your closing.
Thank you. And first of all, I would like to thank the League again for hosting this debate and all the volunteers here that put this together. It's very much appreciated. I grew up in a Democratic household. My grandparents came over from Ireland, and this is no baloney. In every room, they had a cross and a picture of JFK. They were not political, but they instilled in us that we should all go out and vote. So I would ask all the viewers to make sure you go out and vote, make sure your families are voting. As we said, it's our right, and we should be taking advantage of that right. My background is in finance, as you can tell. I'm a CPA. I know the budget inside and out. I think that's so important. And I'm going to tell you, I am going to represent all of our residents equally, Republicans, unaffiliated, and Democrats. Again, I go back to what was said to me last weekend. I want to work for everyone. And I ask for your vote. I'm on 5B of the ballot. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
I want to say it was a very informative and lively debate. I will kind of go back to the ballot questions. So it's to make sure that Madison residents know that there will be 2 local ballot questions on theirs about the town charter. And I also that there's the early voting referenda question, which you may find somewhere on your ballot at the bottom or in the back. So we want you to look for that. Well, we thank the Branford Community TV for recording this debate. We also thank the League of Women Voters of the East Shore Voter Service Team, Daniel Arman and Elise Lowe, who have organized these debates and all the debates we're doing this year. And now it's the turn of the voters to speak, and we hope you will go on November 8th. The polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Please go out and vote and participate in democracy. Thank you.